Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to provide virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. We decided to bring Tom Barrett back from Navigate the Journey, as he did such a great job on our last podcast. So once again, you have Adam Hale from Summit and Tom from Navigate the Journey. And we're going to go down a different path this time than we went last time. So welcome to the show, Tom. And I know we're going to talk about employees, but anything you want to start off with there? We're going to talk about how to keep employees happy and what the key to that is.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me back. So yeah, in terms of keeping employees happy. So I think it all goes back to what Jim Collins said in Good to Great, right? You've got to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. So I'd say the quick answer then to your question, Jamie, right, is in applying all of that, you're going to have happy employees. So that's it. Podcast's over.
All right, let's end this thing.
Sweet.
Done.
Yeah, next question. Where the hell are those people? And what are those seats?
You're saying where? Well, the whole where are they? Well, yeah, I can't help you with that, but I can so in terms of the seats, so as an EOS implementer, it's basically the first thing we do in implementing EOS is figure out what we call an accountability chart. And so that's how we create seats, right? It's effectively the 5 major roles that a person is going to have in their job. And so that's what we call a seat. And it just makes clear what's expected from each person in order for the organization as a whole to be successful.
So when you're talking seats, are you talking just leadership, or are you talking all the way from top to bottom in every role within your organization?
Yeah, top to bottom. So when I'm helping a client create an accountability chart, I even have them put on their vendors or contractors. So for instance, if they're using a fractional CFO, I will have them put that on there because, the fractional CFO needs to get it, want it, and have the capacity to do that really well.
I think what worked for us too is, I think the big distinction there too is trying to, figure out the difference between a job description and what you're talking about in terms of what they need to be great at, like what they have to be accountable for. I think whenever you walked us through that, we kind of struggled. We're like, oh, okay, so this is what they need to do day to day. And it's like, not necessarily, it's what they have to kind of own, right?
Yeah. So that's a great distinction, Adam. So job descriptions are obviously great and are needed, but one of the really helpful things about taking that kind of high level, if you ever see what a seat looks like, I mean, we boil down those 5 roles into 5 bullet points, and oftentimes it's like 1 or 2 words per bullet point. So it's not tasks or activities. It's effectively what's the essence of the role? What are the results they're really responsible for? What areas of the business are they uniquely responsible for?
Yeah, and I think that was really, again, for us personally here at Summit. I mean, Jamie, our accounting director, is here because of the accountability chart. So whenever you were kind of walking through and stressing to us, and I think we even tried to get it a little bit even narrower and went with like top 3 things, just to stay as focused as possible. The other thing that we tried to do with the accountability chart, we're big into forecasting, so we blew it out a little bit. So whenever we did it, there were roles on there where we were putting different people's names multiple times, knowing that at the end of the day, I didn't want to be responsible for A, B, and C. And so what came to fruition for us at Summit, whenever you kind of helped walk us through that, was that my role as COO, I was kind of like this other role that we determined and created called an accounting director. That was Jamie. And then Jody was more acting as like a COO whenever we looked at actually what was getting owned in that seat. So we were able to take a shift and then bring Jamie into the fold and make him responsible for stuff. And it worked out. I mean, that's how we got our director concept and everything really rolled out.
Yeah, I remember all that. Yeah, and what that reminds me of is, when I'm working with a client, we're working through, creating an accountability chart. The most fruitful and productive and value-added conversations is when they're not just talking about their structure, they're also talking about their strategy. Like they're starting to talk about other scenarios. This would be a better way to structure the business, create this role. We would just be way more effective and efficient, or they can also see their future moves. So that is definitely when you're seeing your structure in a whole different way that's going to make the company better.
And what I thought was unique about it, and just to kind of give a little bit of backstory, was so originally Adam came to me and said, is this something you'd be interested in? And I think it was probably the preliminary conversations that you guys were having together. And I said, oh yeah, that sounds like something I'd be interested in. And to be quite frank, I think it's something I'd be good at. And that was kind of the conversation Adam and I had at first. And then when we originally got to the point of, okay, this is the role we're going to put you in, to Adam's point, like it wasn't all right away. It was like, okay, right now we want you to lose about half your client base and do this job half-time. And that was kind of how it was the first year. And then as we grew and we got more clients, and there were more clients for me to direct and more CFOs for me to direct, I kind of lost a couple more clients, and it was definitely a step down path. Is that something pretty common that you see? Is really just it takes a little while to get into that full role?
So a concept with seats is it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time job. It can really be anywhere from 5 hours a week to whatever full-time. So oftentimes in an entrepreneurial business, a person is in more than one seat, and so Jamie, while you were transitioning, kind of from one role to the other, that accountability chart's kind of a great way to help people see not just you in this case, but also everybody else in the organization too, right? That kind of what's going on here, this transition, what it looks like, and also the why behind it as well.
Yeah, good cover, Tom. Yeah, we couldn't afford it, and we wanted to make sure he didn't suck. But no, that's totally true. I think that the visualization and the optics of the team is important. So whenever we rolled that out, a lot of people are like, why Jamie? What is he going to be doing? How's that different from what you're already doing? And so by us mapping that out, we were able to say, no, so these questions, these things, that's Jamie. These things are me. There's a little bit of an overlap there, but I think we made a pretty good distinction, and that really helped us. So that's one of the first things that I jump into with clients. Is, hey, do you have an accountability chart? And most people don't know what I'm talking about. They have an organizational chart and they can kind of talk through things. And I kind of go through that concept. And I know that, we do have a lot of clients that work through, EOS and, but those that don't, that's kind of an introduction for them.
Yeah. And typically, every organization kind of has an org chart, but usually it's just simply stating what is, right, in a very boiled down, like person A reports to person B and maybe their titles, and that's it. And so part of the trap there with a traditional org chart is that you're just describing what has been, what is today, but you're not going into that future scenario planning that you all did at Summit, right? And that's helped to, make the firm better.
So if we map that all out, we got for us, we have the structure in place. We know what it looks like. I mean, for Jody and I know it was like, this is what we want it to look like in 3 years. So we built a little bit bigger than what we currently were. So we had the structure in place. We felt like we had the right seats. Then I guess the next step was, I don't know, we felt like we already knew who the right people were because they were kind of quasi playing in that realm anyway. So it was one of those things where we had to formalize it. Like whenever we went to Jamie, he was kind of already acting a little bit in that capacity. But I mean, I think we should dive into that a little bit deeper though. I mean, what are some of the things whenever people are talking about, because a lot of times people take their best manager or their best producer, take them off the board and think they can manage people, which is a mistake. So what kind of things do you suggest, we do kind of walking through that to make sure we get the right people?
So with the whole, going back to the whole Jim Collins, and which also is an EOS principle, right people, right seats. So So to kind of finish out the right seat, and then maybe let's go talk about the way we look at right people in EOS. So kind of finish out the right seat. So after you get your accountability chart built, so we actually take this position that, again, it's function first and people second. We actually don't build it based on the current people. It's like, what does the organization need? And so in order to put people in seats after the whole accountability chart's built out, we ask 3 questions. Do they get this seat? Do they want it? And then do they have the capacity to do it? In EOS, we say it's got to be 3 yeses to actually put that person in the seat. So Adam, the example you gave there of maybe somebody who was a good, say, producer at a lower level, kind of a good technician. Yeah. So if you're looking to put them into a supervisory seat, right, they may not get it, want, or have the capacity to do it. So by wrestling through those 3 questions and saying yes or no, does the person
help us with that? Because
let's dive into those.
Because that was a great tool that we even did, not just for we've done it with multiple roles within our organization. I know you've kind of walked us through that at different times. So what does it mean to get it, want it, and have capacity?
Yeah. So again, this goes back to when Gino Wickman put EOS together as a system, and it's like, okay, how are we going to simplify ensuring that we have people that are in the right seat? So we came up with these 3. So get it. Here's how I explain my talk. There is a written definition, which you can all find out there. But it's basically, we say, do all the neurons in the person's brain come together when you explain the position? So say you have a 401k practice, right? So if you were to show me that position, I'd probably maybe 10 or 20% of my brain would understand really what that is. I probably wouldn't understand a ton of it. So that's want it is do you want to dive into the get it thing?
Tom. So on the get it thing, because there's 2 different things there, right? You have the get it technically, but then there's also functionally. So again, I think that's what, usually whenever you have a super producer, they want it, right? It becomes almost like the next step for a lot of them. Not always, the different rock stars and superstars kind of a thing, but most of the time, if they're achieving at a high level, they want it, or they think they want it. And they get it because they're technically the best person there. Unfortunately, they might not get the management part of it. So I think there's a important thing. How do you kind of distinguish between the 2 of those?
Yeah. So again, we're kind of looking at, in this hypothetical, say somebody who was a producer, looking at putting them in a supervisory position. So again, in EOS, because we have those 5 roles, those 5 major roles. If you're a supervisor in EOS, one of the 5 roles always is what we call LMA, stands for leadership, management, and accountability. And it's basically, are they able to do all of those things? Are they able to be a great boss? And so in order to be able to say yes, that person X gets this supervisory seat, it would actually include, they can be a great boss.
Okay. So that's cool.
Unpack that a little bit more for me, because I think, obviously I've worked in accounting for a long time, and I've worked with a lot of really good accountants. And then, and when you're in public, at least in large public, the natural step always is for them to move up into that supervisory role. And it pretty much happens all the time. And now that's not necessarily how we do it at Summit, but I've been surprised by people how fast they picked up the management part of it, the leadership part of it. And I've also had people that I thought would do really good at it and didn't do as well at it. So how do you look at someone who's never done it before, who's never been in that leadership role, and decide whether they get it?
Yeah. So that's an interesting situation. I would actually, so in the hypothetical we're talking about here, say if somebody's never really had any supervisory experience before or done it very lightly, I actually would go to the second question. Do you want it?
Okay.
Because So that actually is more often where I find the breakdown in terms of why someone is not a great supervisor or boss, is that they just don't want it. They're kind of falling into the, what Adam's alluded to, that maybe they were a great technical producer and it's just sort of assumed that I've been here for whatever, 5 years or 15 years. So it's just assumed that I should get the promotion to be over the department, because if not, there's something wrong with me. And that's not helpful or good thinking for the individual or for the company. And so again, that's where, I'd go back to, do you want it? Because if they want it, I would be, and if they want it, and then we have some sense that they get it and have the capacity to do it, I'd be willing to give them a shot.
That makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, even though, like I said, sometimes I think people want it because it feels like that next step. So that one for me is like tough. And then the conflict that I have sometimes is whenever I don't think you get it, but you think you get it. You know what I mean? It's like, well, Tom thinks he gets it, but I really don't. I'm not sure if he's there. So let's go to the next one then. I mean, because those can be kind of tricky lines. But I do like, for us, I will say just, real quick, whenever we did all three of these, whenever you're comparing people, then it becomes easier to discern yes or no to those questions. Because whenever I'm comparing Adam and Tom and Jamie, it might be like, does he get it? Well, I don't know. Well, compared to Jamie, he does, or compared to Adam, he does. But, one of those things. So it's easier to like kind of make that, if chart it out whenever you have multiple people next to each other. So, so that said, like the capacity, does that just mean like I physically have enough time, or what does that mean?
So that third question we ask, capacity, it has a lot in there. Time capacity is a big one. So in an entrepreneurial business, there's always just a history and a culture of people having more on their plate than they can, humanly possibly do in a 40, 50 plus hour week. And also people often have a hard time delegating and letting go of responsibilities. Oftentimes why businesses get stuck is actually even your best people, because they're still holding on to certain roles and not delegating, and they don't have enough time. That can be a reason to get stuck. So when I'm working through the people analyzer, that's the whole tool we use with Right People, Right Seat. And when it comes to the capacity, probably the most common reason initially for somebody to get a no on capacity is actually time. But of course, it's the easiest one to fix. You just need to delegate something from them. And of course, it also is the assumption that there's somebody that can actually take that responsibility from them.
Yeah, delegation, we could probably spend an entire podcast on delegation. So also with capacity, sometimes for us, like you said, it's the ability to get it done within a certain amount of time. But we just know that for us, sometimes we know a certain role requires, you've got to, juggle, or you got to spin these 8 plates at once. Does somebody have the capacity to do that? They're really great at doing one at a time, but whenever you make them spin 4 or 5 at the same time, everything crashes. So at least in our world, that's kind of how we look at capacity a lot of times.
Yeah, and to finish out the capacity in terms of how we look at it in EOS, so time's big, but it's also things like relational capacity, just kind of emotional capacity to do that particular role. Yeah. And ultimately, when I'm working with a client with capacity, I ultimately say, the main, so all those things are true: time, emotional capacity, but also the other big thing ultimately is all about, can they produce the results that we need to out of the seat, right? Are they getting the job done? And there's kind of like a results aspect to capacity as well.
So we've talked a lot about promotion and internal movement here. So let's say we build our structure and we're able to fill 2 out of the 3 leadership roles, but the third one, there's just no one within our organization that has the ability to do that. I think it's a lot easier to make those assessments on someone you've been working with for 6 months, a year, 18 months. How do you judge those 3 things through the interview process?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So again, having clearly defined, seat and accountability chart, helping that person see the bigger picture, but also what would be required of them. And then in the interview process, what I would do is I would ask very specific questions that would help you assess, do they get it, want it, have the capacity to do it? And including things like, when I call, 3 of your references and I ask them, some kind of aspect that's going to get behind you getting it, wanting it, and having the capacity to do it, it's going to make it very real for them. And you're going to find out from their experience and history, and not that there's some sweet talker trying to say good stuff in the moment that's not fully true. So yes, I would just vet them really hard on how their past demonstrates they get it, want it, have the capacity to do it.
What about the people analyzer? You mentioned that earlier. I think that's a pretty cool tool. Is that something that you can use on somebody that, that hasn't been in your organization? Is that something that you can kind of use throughout the hiring process or no?
Yeah. So yeah, great question. So it is technically designed for somebody that already has been hired and you have experience with. So it would be, technically not the best to apply it directly in a hiring situation, although I think the concepts apply. And actually the other part we haven't talked about here is actually what makes for a right person. So we believe what makes a right person is that they fit your culture, they fit your core values. And so 100% when you're in a hiring situation, you need to be vetting against your core values, because on the presumption, which is a presumption that you've actually identified your true core values, you've got to make sure that the person you're bringing in, they won't be rejected by the culture. The opposite's going to happen. It'll be a hand in glove kind of fit culture-wise.
Oh yeah, no, that was another. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I guess the way that we worked together initially, we kind of worked in little pockets of these things. So, how they all align together, but the culture is a big thing. And we go through core values whenever we're meeting with a prospect. We tell them what what's near and dear to our heart. Whenever we talk about humor, we're like, well, you got to be able to take a joke because we're all smart asses around here. And we always just kind of throw one-liner zingers at people all day long. So like if you're somebody that gets uptight about that or been, like this isn't going to be the atmosphere for you. But if you can take a joke and just kind of roll with the punches, you'll love it here.
Yeah, and the thing is, the really important thing is that Summit, you have discovered your true core values, because frankly, almost the vast majority of clients I work with, when I initially work with them, the core values they have truly aren't core. So they fall into a few different what we call core values traps. They either have what we call aspirational core values, right? They're not true today. They need to be, or they hope to be true in the future. They may be using what we call permission to play values. So that can sometimes be things like honesty, truthfulness, basic behavioral
not a murderer
things that they're not really unique. Or being able to, I guess, add and subtract for a CPA firm, multiply, divide.
It's funny because we just had this conversation today with Zach, and I think this is something that, I've been through so many core value and mission statement conversations, and I think Zach made a great point today. We were meeting with him, Zach, who works with us and works with you, but, he talked about having your core values be operational and make sure that you actually have them as part of your operation. And I think that once we went through our core values, and Adam and Jody were like, okay, when we're hiring, you guys need to make sure we're looking at these. Like that to me was the first step that, okay, this was more than just like a 2-hour meeting for us to get warm and fuzzy. This was actually something that we're going to apply going forward. So ever since that moment, like whenever I hire, I make sure to think about those core values because it is that important.
Well, and another one was candid as well, because, candid is a core value of ours too. And we have some pretty, regimented every 2-week 360 reviews. So if you're not like telling people like, this is what we really value in the organization, they might look at it like it's an attack. But if you can kind of set the tone and say, no, this is for betterment. We just want to make sure that everybody's getting on the same page. It's a real nice, like, here's what's going right. Here's what you can, use a little bit more work on, those kind of things. It just sets the tone early on, I guess.
Yeah. Cause again, too many companies, what their core values are they're just these kind of bland, generic statements that are, in these posters of people, climbing mountains or,
yeah, that's what I always thought it was. I fought you a little bit at the beginning because I was just like, I'm not big into that kind of crap.
Oh yeah, yeah, and neither am I. And there's a lot of it out there, that's not what we're talking about, listeners.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I think not only that, I mean, the core values, I'll even take it a further step. Like we went through our core values and not only looked how it applied to our internal team, but how it applied to our customers and how we work with them as well. And I mean, we have like a nice little kind of, one sentencer after every one, how we apply it. And we talk to our team about that. And when something goes sideways with a customer or something goes sideways with a team member, we always come back and we just say, hey, like, how are we working through these things? So
yeah, the one aspect of core values that I always reiterate is that really they're behaviors that are going to actually define a right person, right? Because sometimes core values get defined in these kind of ways that are just true about the organization as a whole and not individual people. So the way to discover and write your core values is that you can those are behaviors that individual human beings should be doing consistently.
So core values is the starting point though, you think? Like, and then the accountability chart, if we were kind of doing these things in order?
So, yeah, right. Well, yeah. So again, the concept is we believe that you got to get the right people on the bus. So again, right people share your core values, and then get them in the right seat. So how then that works is, you create the whole accountability chart, then you have all of your seats, and typically, a person is hired for one particular seat. But then, at some point, right, things grow or change and maybe they're up for a promotion. So then you have to evaluate them for another seat because, you can have two people situations. One is that you have a right person, but for whatever reason, they're in a wrong seat. They don't get it. They either don't get it, want it, or have the capacity to do it. So then you're going to have to ask, is there another seat in the company that they could get it, want it, have the capacity to do it? So typically the smaller the company, the harder that is, not impossible. The bigger the company, right, or the more change there is, that's possible. And then the other kind of people situation is you've got a wrong person in the right seat. So the kind of classic example of this is, say, somebody who's like a salesperson or the sales leader. They're just knocking it out of the park, phones ringing off the hook with sales. Frankly, they're the productive jerk. Right? Is that allowed on this podcast? Am I going to get bleeped out?
Jerk's definitely allowed.
Yeah, it gets much worse with
you. You're Adam enough.
But those situations are really hard, right? Because it's like the person is delivering, and they could be delivering a ton of value to the organization, but because they're not a right person, they are killing your culture in more ways than leaders recognize.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction too, because it does seem like whenever we deal with people problems, a lot of times it's kind of those two things. Either you got somebody that's killing it, but unfortunately they're kind of a cancer to the culture, or on the flip side, you have somebody that's super loyal, great champion of the company, just lives out everything, but they're just not, they just can't perform. So a lot of times people try to move them around and create something, and because they know that, good people are hard to find. So they want to find something within the organization. And I guess what I just heard from you is you just can't do that. I mean, if the seat doesn't exist, you have to have a hard conversation and move people along.
Yeah, completely. Because, there's another aspect here, another line I like to use with my clients. It's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So if you're tolerating either a wrong person who doesn't fit your culture and core values, or somebody who's not in a right seat, you're kind of breeding these things that you just don't want to be true, right? That behavior doesn't matter, that performance doesn't matter, and both of those things are absolutely essential.
And I've been in enough of those conversations, and they are hard. They're hard to let people go. They're hard to make people exit the company. But to your point, and I think it's a really good point for us to end on because we're on time here, but I think that if you have that wrong person, what it says to the rest of your company and then kind of the message you're sending there, because it's either sending, oh, sweet, I don't have to perform because those two people over there have never performed, so I'm fine. Or that's what it takes to be successful in this company is to be a jerk, or whatever that message is when you have your employees, you are sending a message to the entire team. So you kind of have to act quickly when people are in the wrong place.
Yeah, completely.
Well, that sucks. Yeah. So it's really hard to get people great people in the right seat. Luckily, we have your team and we've been able to kind of build out the framework, and we got a bunch of really awesome people in a great seat. So I think that's my takeaway is you just need to be very deliberate about that and maybe bring somebody in.
Yeah. And there is a kind of a chicken and egg thing here, or success begets success, or really failure begets failure. So that's why, for all the listeners out there, I would say, 80% of the time my work with a client, and I'm sure even you all as CFOs, so much of your conversations are around people. And so, for your listeners, if you know deep down that someone or some set of people are just, they're just not working out, or not right people, not in the right seats, you've got to confront it straight on, and you've got to make it better, because ultimately you're not going to get what you want out of your business unless we actually say you have to have 100% right people in the right seats. So that's really the path to ultimate business success is true that.
And I think we've made it sound hard in this podcast, but I can tell you it's worth the work. I mean, I've been in companies where it wasn't right, and we had a lot of people in the wrong seats or the wrong people, and it wasn't a great place to work. And then I feel like at Summit we're there. We have a lot of people in the right seats, and it works really well, and everybody's moving in the same direction, and it makes going to work really easy every day. So I think that it's definitely worth all the work that we put into it.
100%.
Yeah, and it's actually no harder to run a great company than a mediocre company. It really isn't. It's just there's some maybe more hard conversations or hard decisions, but ultimately running a great company is actually easier than running a mediocre.
Yeah, I was going to say, as an owner, I can tell you the peace of mind of just having the clarity of knowing that people are where they should be and having that vision of what the company looks like. I mean, we spend a lot of time in the finances and blowing those things out, but obviously the people are the most important, the most important asset that we have as a company. And so putting them in the right place just provides such peace of mind for us that it's a great exercise, and highly recommend it. And, you can do it by yourself, but Tom, I know that Jody and I couldn't have done it by ourselves. I mean, we tried for years and weren't really deliberate, and you really held us accountable to it. And I really appreciate you walking us through that process.
Yeah. And you got Jamie now, so it all worked out.
Yeah.
That's right. For now. Well,
until the next accountability chart, and we got to move it around a little bit. We'll have
Exactly.
this get it one at capacity conversation offline.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Well,
the humor core value too. I'm suspicious on that one.
Well, I definitely appreciate you guys joining us, and I know we're going to have you on again, Tom, in the near future here. So look forward to having further conversations about this. I think this is really important for our listeners. So we'll just keep bringing you on as we find topics for you. So thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks.
Enjoy this episode? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.